Sam Miller woke up to the sound of rain hitting his bedroom window. The dark clouds made the morning feel like evening, and he had to squint at his alarm clock to make sure it really was 6:30 a.m. He stretched and yawned before swinging his legs over the side of the bed. Another Tuesday in Oak Ridge. Another day of teaching science to teenagers who mostly stared at their phones when they thought he wasn't looking. Sam shuffled to the bathroom and stared at his reflection. At 42, the gray at his temples was becoming more noticeable. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the last few years. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young anymore either. He had that look that middle-aged men get when they've settled into their lives so completely that each day blends seamlessly into the next. After a quick shower, Sam made coffee and toast, just like he did every morning. He ate while checking the weather forecast on his phone. More rain for the rest of the week. He would need to cancel his weekend fishing trip if this kept up. The thought brought a small wave of disappointment, but not surprise. Sam had learned long ago that it was better to expect little. That way, life's small disappointments stung less. He grabbed his worn leather briefcase, the same one he'd carried for the last 15 years, and stepped out onto his covered porch. The rain was coming down harder now. Sam locked his front door, then made a dash for his car. His sensible Honda Civic, 8 years old with decent mileage, waited for him in the driveway. Inside, the familiar smell of the pine-scented air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror greeted him. The drive to Oak Ridge High School took exactly 12 minutes, as it did every morning. Sam pulled into his designated parking spot at 7:22 a.m. He had 38 minutes before his first class. Plenty of time to review his lesson plan on cellular respiration and make copies of the lab worksheet for his afternoon classes. The school hallways were still quiet. A few early arriving students huddled around their lockers, and the janitor was mopping up puddles of rainwater near the entrance. Sam nodded at the familiar faces as he made his way to the science department. His classroom was exactly as he had left it the day before. Neat rows of desks facing the whiteboard, lab tables at the back, posters of the periodic table and human anatomy on the walls, a space that had become as familiar to him as his own living room. Sam was setting up the microscopes for his afternoon lab when his phone buzzed. A text from the school secretary. "Principal Dawson wants to see you in her office at 8 cow." Sam checked his watch. He had 15 minutes. What could Linda Dawson want? His annual performance review wasn't scheduled until the spring. Maybe it was about the upcoming science fair. As department head, Sam was responsible for organizing the event. Or perhaps budget cuts were coming again, and she wanted to warn him before the official announcement. At exactly 8 IEs, Sam knocked on the principal's door. "Come in," Linda called. Sam entered the office to find Linda sitting behind her desk with an unfamiliar man in a gray suit. The man stood as Sam entered. "Sam, this is Mr. Peterson. He's an attorney," Linda said, gesturing to the visitor. "Mr. Miller, thank you for meeting with me," Mr. Peterson said, extending his hand. "I apologize for the unexpected nature of this meeting." Sam shook the man's hand, confusion settling over him. "Is everything okay?" "Please have a seat," Linda said, gesturing to the chair beside Mr. Peterson. Sam sat down, setting his briefcase, on the floor beside him. The air in the office felt heavy, charged with something he couldn't identify. "Mr. Miller, I'm here representing the estate of Franklin Miller," Mr. Peterson said, opening a leather portfolio on his lap. "My great-uncle Frank?" Sam asked, surprised. He barely remembered the man, a distant relative who had sent birthday cards with $5 bills when Sam was a child. The cards had stopped coming somewhere around Sam's 12th birthday, and he had nearly forgotten about his great-uncle entirely. "Yes, I regret to inform you that your great-uncle passed away 3 weeks ago in Colorado." Sam nodded slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't understand why you're here." Mr. Peterson pulled out a document from his portfolio. "Franklin Miller left a will, Mr. Miller, and you are the sole beneficiary." The words didn't immediately register in Sam's mind. "Beneficiary? Of what?" "Your great-uncle owned a cabin on 20 acres of land in the mountains outside of Boulder, Colorado. He also had modest savings and some personal possessions. Olive, it has been left to you. Sam stared at the attorney, then at Linda, who was watching him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. There must be some mistake, Sam said. I barely knew the man. We haven't spoken in 30 years. There's no mistake, Mr. Peterson said, handing Sam a sealed envelope. This was to be delivered to you along with the notification. The deed to the property and other relevant documents are being prepared and will be sent to you once you've signed the necessary paperwork. Sam took the envelope. His name was written on it in shaky handwriting. He turned it over in his hands, not opening it yet. Why me? He asked, more to himself than to the attorney. I can't answer that, Mr. Miller. I only met your great-uncle once when he updated his will 5 years ago. He was a private man. Linda cleared her throat. Sam, if you need some time this morning, I can have Bill cover your first period class. Ambro shook his head, still trying to process what was happening. No, that's not necessary. I'm fine. He looked at Mr. Peterson. What do I need to do? The attorney spent the next 20 minutes explaining the inheritance process. The cabin and land were free of any mortgage or liens. The property taxes were paid through the end of the year. Sam would need to sign several documents and decide what he wanted to do with the property. He could move in, sell it, or leave it vacant. The decision was entirely his. By the time the bell rang for first period, Sam had signed the initial paperwork and tucked the mysterious envelope into his briefcase. He thanked Mr. Peterson, shook his hand again, and excused himself to teach his class. Throughout the day, Sam moved through his lessons mechanically. He explained cellular respiration, demonstrated how to use the microscopes, and answered questions. But his mind kept drifting to the envelope in his briefcase and the cabin in Colorado he had never seen. During his lunch break, Sam sat alone in his classroom and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short handwritten note. Sam, you won't remember me well, but I've followed your life from a distance. You became a teacher like I once was before I found my true calling in these mountains. The cabin has been my home for 40 years. It holds my life's work. I leave it to you because I believe you'll understand its value once you see it. There are answers here to questions you haven't thought to ask yet. The key is under the blue flower pot on the porch. Your Uncle Frank. Sam read the note 3 times. Questions he hadn't thought to ask yet? What did that mean? And how had Frank followed his life from a distance? When the final bell rang at 3:15, Sam gathered his things more quickly than usual. He drove home through the rain, his mind racing with possibilities. In his driveway, he sat in his car for a long moment, listening to the rain on the roof and thinking about the unexpected turn his day had taken. Inside his house, Sam went straight to his computer. He searched for information about Boulder, Colorado, and the surrounding mountain areas. He looked at real estate listings to get an idea of what properties like his uncle's might be worth. He found himself looking at job postings for science teachers in Colorado schools. By evening, Sam had made a decision. He would use some of his saved vacation days to visit the cabin. He needed to see what his uncle had left him, to understand why this distant relative had chosen him as his heir. Maybe there was nothing special about the place. Maybe it was just a run-down old cabin in the woods, but maybe, and this thought sent an unexpected thrill through Sam, maybe it was something more. For the first time in years, Sam felt a sense of anticipation, of not knowing what tomorrow might bring. As he packed a suitcase and booked a flight to Denver for the following weekend, he realized that the predictable rhythm of his life had suddenly skipped a beat. And strangely, he was glad for it. Sam's flight landed in Denver on Friday afternoon. The mountains in the distance looked huge compared to the gentle hills of Oak Ridge. He rented a small SUV at the airport, thinking it might be better for mountain roads than his usual sedan. The woman at the rental counter gave him a map, though his phone had GPS. She told him mountain roads sometimes had poor signal. The drive from Denver to Boulder took about 40 minutes. Sam rolled down his window at times, breathing in the fresh mountain air. It smelled different here, sharper, cleaner. As he left the main highway and began climbing into the mountains outside Boulder, The roads narrowed and twisted. Tall pine. Trees lined the route, and sometimes Sam caught glimpses of the valley below. Following the directions Mr. Peterson had provided, Sam turned onto an unmarked gravel road. The SUV bounced and rattled as he drove slowly. After about 2 miles, he saw it. A wooden mailbox with Miller painted on the side in fading letters. Sam turned into the driveway, which was really just 2 dirt tracks with grass growing between them. The cabin appeared as he rounded a bend. It was bigger than Sam had imagined, built from logs with a wide covered porch wrapping around the front. A stone chimney rose from one side, and large windows faced the view. Behind the cabin, tall pines swayed in the afternoon breeze. In front, the land sloped down to reveal a small lake about a 1/4 mile away, its surface glittering in the sunlight. Sam parked and sat for a moment, taking it all in. This was his now, all of it. The thought was too big to fully grasp. He stepped out of the car and stretched. The air was cooler here than in Denver, and very quiet. Sam could hear birds calling from the trees and the soft rustle of wind through pine needles. After the constant background noise of Oak Ridge, lawn mowers, traffic, neighbors, the silence felt almost physical. Sam walked up to the porch, his shoes creaking on the wooden steps. He remembered his uncle's note and looked for a blue flower pot. There it was, next to the front door, filled with what looked like long-dead plants. He lifted it and found a key, just as Frank had said. The key turned easily in the lock and the door swung open with a groan. Sam stepped inside. The air was stuffy and smelled of dust and something else, old books maybe, or the lingering scent of wood smoke. He found a light switch and flipped it, not expecting anything to happen after 3 weeks of emptiness. To his surprise, lights came on, revealing the cabin's main room. It was a large space with a high ceiling. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Bookshelves covered another. A worn leather sofa and 2 armchairs formed a sitting area on a faded rug. Through a doorway, Sam could see a small kitchen with old but clean-looking appliances. But what caught his attention was the work area that took up nearly half the room. A large desk stood covered with papers, notebooks, and what looked like plant specimens in various stages of preservation. Nearby shelves held more specimens, along with jars of soil samples, each carefully labeled. On the wall hung maps of the surrounding area, marked with colored pins and notes. Sam moved closer to the desk, careful not to disturb anything. He picked up a notebook and opened it to find page after page of neat handwriting, dates, locations, and detailed drawings of plants. His uncle had been studying the local plant life, it seemed, with scientific precision. A framed photo on the desk showed a much younger Frank standing beside a woman in hiking clothes, both smiling widely and holding what looked like plant samples. They stood in front of this very cabin, though the trees behind it were smaller in the photo. Sam spent the next hour exploring the cabin. Besides the main room and kitchen, there were 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with an old clawfoot tub, and a hider, screened porch at the back. One bedroom was clearly Frank's with a simple bed, dresser, and more books. The other looked like it had been set up as a guest room, but was also being used for storage. Boxes were stacked against one wall, and an old trunk sat at the foot of the bed. Everything was neat and orderly if dusty. Frank had lived simply, but with purpose. His presence lingered in every corner of the place. As evening approached, Sam realized he hadn't brought any food. He found the refrigerator empty except for some condiments and a few beers. The cabinets held basic staples: coffee, rice, canned beans, and soup. Not enough for a proper meal. Sam decided to head back down the mountain to find a grocery store. As he was leaving, he noticed a wooden building about 50 yards from the cabin, partially hidden by trees. A shed or workshop, perhaps. He made a mental note to check it out when he returned. The nearest town was a small community about 15 minutes down the mountain. Sam found a general store that also served as the local post office and cafe. As he gathered supplies, the gray-haired woman at the counter studied him curiously. "You staying up at the Miller place?" she asked as she rang up his groceries. "Yes, I am," Sam replied, surprised. "Did you know Frank Miller?" "Everyone around here knew Frank," she said with a nod. Been wondering who'd take over his place since he passed. You family? His great-nephew. I didn't know him well, to be honest. The woman, her name tag read Betty, smiled kindly. Frank was a private sort, but a good man. Been here longer than most, studying those plants of his. Plants? Sam asked, eager for any information. Oh yes, he was always hiking around, collecting samples, taking notes. Worked with the university folks sometimes. Very dedicated to his research, though I can't say I ever understood exactly what he was looking for. Betty handed Sam his change. You planning to stay long? Just the weekend for now. I'm a teacher back in Oak Ridge. I need to get back for classes on Monday. Betty nodded. Well, if you need anything, we're open every day till 6. There's a diner next door that makes a decent breakfast if you don't feel like cooking. Sam thanked her and headed back to the cabin with his supplies. As he drove, he thought about what Betty had said. His uncle had been known in the community, respected for his work that Sam now realized he knew nothing about. Back at the cabin, Sam put away the groceries and made a simple dinner of pasta with jarred sauce. He ate at the small kitchen table, looking out at the darkening forest through the window. After washing his dishes, he returned to the main room and the mystery of his uncle's research. For the next few hours, Sam carefully examined the papers on the desk. Some were field notes, recording plant locations, growth patterns, and soil conditions. Others were more formal, drafts of what looked like scientific papers, complete with citations and methodical descriptions of findings. Sam found several folders containing correspondence with a Dr. Diane Morris from the University of Colorado's biology department. They had apparently collaborated for many years. The work was detailed and extensive, focused on rare alpine plant species and their adaptations to changing climate conditions. Some of the papers mentioned plants that could only be found in this specific mountain region, including several that Frank described as previously thought extinct. As midnight approached, Sam's eyes grew tired from reading in the dim light. He decided to continue his exploration in the morning. He took a quick shower in the old bathroom, where the water pressure was surprisingly good, and settled into the guest bedroom. The mattress was firm but comfortable, and the weight of the thick quilt felt reassuring in the cool mountain air. Before falling asleep, Sam looked at his phone. No signal, as the rental car woman had warned. He felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, no one could reach him. No emails from school administrators, no texts from colleagues asking for coverage of their classes. Just silence and the occasional hoot of an owl outside. Sam's last thought before drifting off was about the locked wooden chest he had noticed in the attic during his exploration. He hadn't found a key for it yet. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would look for the key and see what other secrets his uncle had left behind. Sam woke early the next morning, sunlight streaming through the window he had forgotten to cover with the curtain. For a moment, he felt confused by the unfamiliar room. Then he remembered the cabin, his uncle, the inheritance. He stretched and got out of bed feeling more rested than he had in months. After making coffee in the old percolator he found in the kitchen cabinet, Sam went outside to the porch with his mug. The morning air was crisp and cool. Mist hung over the small lake in the distance. Birds called to each other from the trees. Sam breathed deeply, enjoying the pine-scented air and the complete absence of traffic noise. When he finished his coffee, Sam decided to look for the key to the wooden chest. He started in Frank's bedroom, carefully opening drawers and checking pockets in the clothes that still hung in the closet. He found nothing that looked like it would fit the old-fashioned lock on the chest. Next, he searched the desk in the main room, sorting through pencils, paper clips, and small tools. In the bottom drawer, tucked inside an envelope, he found a small brass key. It looked old, with an ornate design on the head. Sam felt a surge of excitement as he took it back to the guest room. The key slid into the lock on the wooden chest and turned with a satisfying click. Sam lifted the heavy lid, which creaked on its hinges. Inside, he found several leather-bound journals stacked neatly on top of folders and loose papers. He lifted out the top journal and opened it. The journal began in 1983, more than 40 years. Ago. Frank wrote about moving to the cabin after leaving his teaching job in Denver. He described his early explorations of the surrounding forest and his growing interest in the plant life. The writing was clear and detailed, with small sketches in the margins. Sam spent the next hour reading through the journals, moving from one to the next. They told the story of a man who had found his purpose in studying and protecting the unique plants of this mountain ecosystem. Frank wrote about his excitement when discovering a plant species thought to be extinct, about his concerns over changing weather patterns affecting growth cycles, and about his friendship with Diane Morris, the botanist from the university. In the later journals, Frank mentioned a map he had created showing the locations of the rarest plant species. Sam looked through the papers from the chest, but didn't find anything that looked like a map. He did find numerous letters between Frank and Diane, spanning decades of collaboration and friendship. The most recent journal ended just a month before Frank's death. In the final entries, Frank wrote about feeling his age, about knowing he didn't have much time left. He mentioned Sam several times, expressing hope that his great-nephew would find value in his life's work. "I've watched Sam from a distance," Frank wrote. "He has the same curiosity I had at his age, the same patient way of observing. But he has settled for less than he could be. Perhaps the cabin and my research will awaken something in him that has gone dormant." Sam closed the journal feeling strangely exposed. How had Frank known anything about him? They hadn't spoken in decades, yet his uncle seemed to have followed his career, his life choices. Under the journals and papers in the chest, Sam found a large envelope. Inside was the map Frank had mentioned, a detailed drawing of the surrounding mountain area with locations marked in red ink. Notes in the margins described what rare plants could be found at each spot. Some of the locations had dates next to them, showing when Frank had last confirmed the plants were still growing there. Sam was about to close the chest when he noticed something else at the very bottom, a framed photograph. He lifted it out and found himself looking at a family gathering from long ago. He recognized his parents, much younger, and himself as a boy of perhaps 7 or 8. Standing next to them was a tall, lean man with kind eyes and a serious expression. Uncle Frank, much younger than in the desk photo with Diane. Sam had no memory of this gathering or of meeting his uncle in person. He put everything back in the chest, except the most recent journal and the map. These he took with him as he left the cabin to explore the wooden building he had noticed the day before. The structure turned out to be a small greenhouse attached to a workshop. Inside the greenhouse, Sam found rows of plants growing in carefully, labeled pots. Some looked like seedlings, others like mature specimens. A watering system with a timer was keeping them alive despite Frank's absence. In the workshop section, there were more plant specimens in various stages of preservation, microscopes and scientific equipment. Shelves held reference books and more maps hung on the walls. This had clearly been where Frank did much of his research work. Sam returned to the cabin, thinking about what he had discovered. His great-uncle had dedicated his life to studying and preserving rare plants in this mountain ecosystem. It was work that seemed important, maybe even vital, given what Sam knew about declining biodiversity and climate change. After making himself a sandwich for lunch, Sam decided to visit one of the locations marked on Frank's map. He chose one that wasn't too far from the cabin, a spot marked Blue Gentian Colony, confirmed 2023. According to the map, it should be about a mile away, near a rocky outcrop overlooking the lake. Sam filled a water bottle, grabbed his phone to take pictures, and set out along a narrow trail that led from behind the cabin. The path was well worn but becoming slightly overgrown, suggesting it hadn't been used in a few months. It wound through the forest, sometimes steep, but never difficult to follow. After about 30 minutes of hiking, Sam reached the rocky outcrop described on the map. The view was spectacular. The lake below, mountains in the distance, forest stretching in all directions. He stood for a while just taking it in, understanding why his uncle had chosen this place to live. Then he began looking for the blue gentians. According to Frank's notes, they grew in the sheltered areas between rocks where soil collected. Sam searched carefully, moving from one rocky crevice to another. Just as he was beginning to think he wouldn't find them, he spotted a patch of deep blue flowers growing in the shadow of a large boulder. The plants were small but vibrant, with trumpet-shaped flowers of an intense blue color. Sam took several photos with his phone. Then he sat on a rock near them, thinking about his uncle coming to the same spot year after year to check on these flowers. It was nearly sunset when Sam returned to the cabin. He was tired from the hike but felt good, more alive somehow, more connected to something larger than his daily routine in Oak Ridge. That evening, Sam cooked a simple dinner and then sat at Frank's desk with the journal. He read more about his uncle's work and his connection with Diane Morris. According to the journal, Diane had retired from the university several years ago, but her daughter, Ellie, now ran the biology department's conservation program. Sam realized that Ellie might be interested in Frank's research. The work was too important to be left sitting in this cabin, especially the discovery of plant species thought to be extinct. Tomorrow, he decided, he would drive to Boulder and visit the university. Even though it was Sunday, someone in the biology department might be working. As he prepared for bed, Sam thought about his life back in Oak Ridge, his small house, his predictable job, the fishing trips that were his main excitement. It all seemed strangely distant now, as if he were looking at someone else's life. Here in the mountains, surrounded by his uncle's passion and purpose, Sam felt something shifting inside him, a curiosity awakening, a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. The university campus was quiet on Sunday morning. Sam parked in a nearly empty lot and checked the campus map on his phone. The biology building was on the north side, a modern structure with lots of glass and steel. Sam walked across the green lawns carrying a backpack with Frank's most recent journal and the map of plant locations. The main doors of the biology building were locked, but Sam noticed a graduate student exiting through a side door. He caught the door before it closed and slipped inside. The hallways were empty and dim with only emergency lighting on. Sam followed signs to the Department of Biological Sciences on the 3rd floor. Most office doors were closed and dark, but at the end of one hallway, light spilled from an open door. Sam approached and saw a woman sitting at a desk, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, glasses perched on her nose as she studied something on her computer screen. A nameplate on the door read, Dr. Eleanor Morris, Associate Professor. Sam knocked gently on the doorframe. The woman looked up, startled. "Sorry to disturb you," Sam said. "Are you Ellie Morris, Diane Morris's daughter?" She studied him with curious brown eyes. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Sam Miller." "Frank Miller was my great-uncle. He passed away recently." Recognition flickered across her face. "Frank Miller?" "Yes, my mother worked with him for years." She gestured to a chair. "Please come in." "I was sorry to hear about his passing. Mom was quite upset when she heard." Sam sat down, placing his backpack on the floor beside him. "I didn't know my uncle well. Actually, I barely knew him at all. But he left me his cabin and everything in it." Ellie nodded. "Mom told me about that place. A little paradise, she called." She leaned forward slightly. "So what brings you here, Mr. Miller?" "Sam, please. And I'm here because I've been going through my uncle's things. He left decades of research, journals, specimens, maps." Sam pulled out the journal and map from his backpack. "I think his work was important, especially his documentation of rare plant species. I wanted to make sure it didn't just sit gathering dust in the cabin." Ellie's eyes widened as Sam placed the items on her desk. She opened the journal and scanned a few pages, then unfolded the map. "This is incredible," she said softly. "Frank was brilliant, but he rarely published his findings formally. Mom always said he was more interested in the work itself than in academic recognition." She looked up at Sam. "Do you have more materials like this at the cabin?" "Lots more. Journals going back to the 1980s. A greenhouse with living specimens. A workshop full of preserved plants and research equipment." Ellie sat back in her chair, thinking, this could be very valuable data, especially the long-term observations of how plant populations have changed over decades. She tapped the map. And these locations of rare species. Some of these plants were thought to be extinct until Frank found them. "That's what his journal said," Sam agreed. "I visited one of the sites yesterday, a place where blue gentians grow. They were exactly where he marked them on the map. Ellie smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her serious face. The Rocky Mountain blue gentian. It's an indicator species. Its health tells us a lot about the overall ecosystem. Mom and Frank spent years tracking their population decline and then gradual recovery. She looked at Sam with new interest. So you've been exploring the area yourself? Just, little. I'm heading back to Oak Ridge today. I'm a science teacher and I have classes tomorrow. A science teacher? Ellie raised an eyebrow. Like Frank was before he moved to the mountains. What do you teach? High school biology and environmental science, Sam replied. Nothing as specialized as your work here. But you understand the importance of this research, Ellie said. It wasn't a question. I do. That's why I came to find you. Ellie looked at the journal and map again, then back at Sam. I'd like to see the rest of Frank's materials. This could form the basis for several important papers, maybe even a book on mountain ecosystem changes. Would you be open to collaborating on this? We could properly document his work and make sure it contributes to the field. I would, Sam said, surprised by his own quick response. But as I said, I'm heading back today. When can you come back, or? Ellie hesitated. Would you allow me to visit the cabin sometime to go through the materials there? Sam thought about his teaching schedule, about his small house in Oak Ridge sitting empty. I could come back for spring break in 3 weeks. I'd have a full week. Then? Ellie nodded. That would work. I could meet you there, help sort through everything. She took out a business card and wrote her cell number on the back. Call me when you have specific dates. Sam took the card, feeling a connection forming, not just to Ellie but to his uncle's work, to the mountains, to something larger than his everyday life. As they talked more about Frank's research, Ellie's phone rang. She glanced at it and frowned. I should take this, it's the department chair. She answered the call and her frown deepened as she listened. Yes, I'm aware of the meeting tomorrow. No, I haven't finished the report yet. I understand it's important. She sighed. Yes, I'll have it ready. She hung up and gave Sam an apologetic look. Sorry about that. There's a situation I'm dealing with. Problem with the department? Sam asked. Ellie hesitated, then seemed to decide to trust him. A development company, Mountain Vista, bought land adjacent to a protected area where we conduct research. They're planning a luxury resort with golf courses, spas, the works. The environmental impact could be devastating to several fragile ecosystems, including some of the areas Frank documented. Sam remembered the map. Are any of Frank's rare plant locations on that land? Some are nearby, close enough to be affected by construction, water usage, increased human traffic. Ellie rubbed her temples. We're fighting it, but Mountain Vista has a lot of money and political connections. The university is divided. Some see potential benefits in partnering with them. Sam thought about the blue gentians he had seen, surviving in their rocky shelter, for who knew how many centuries. The idea of them being destroyed for a golf course made him angry in a way that surprised him. What can be done? He asked. We need solid data showing the ecological importance of the area, documentation of endangered species, evidence of why the ecosystem needs to remain undisturbed. Ellie gestured at Frank's journal. Your uncle's research could be crucial for this. Sam nodded slowly. Then we should use it. Ellie studied him for a moment. This isn't your fight, Sam. You just inherited a cabin and a bunch of old journals. You could sell the property and walk away. The thought had occurred to Sam. The cabin and land would be worth a considerable amount, especially to a developer like Mountain Vista. He could pay off his mortgage in Oak Ridge, maybe even take an early retirement. What would happen to the land if I sold it? He asked. Depends who bought it. If it was Mountain Vista or a similar developer, they'd likely clear parts of it for more vacation homes or resort facilities. If it was a conservation group or the state parks department, it might be preserved. Ellie's expression was carefully neutral. It's your property, Sam, your decision. Sam thought about his uncle living alone in that cabin for decades, carefully documenting the plants around him, preserving seeds, tracking changes. It hadn't been just a hobby. Frank had been protecting something valuable. "I need to think about it," Sam said finally. "But I won't be making any quick decisions about selling." Ellie smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." She glanced at her watch. "I should get back to that report. But I'll look forward to working with you on Frank's research." As Sam left the campus and drove back toward the cabin, his mind was full of conflicting thoughts. He had come to Colorado expecting to find a simple property to deal with, maybe fix up and sell, maybe keep as a vacation home. Instead, he had found his uncle's life work and a potential battle over land development, and he had found Ellie Morris, whose passion for conservation matched Frank's, whose serious face transformed when she smiled. Sam realized he was driving more slowly than necessary, postponing his return to Oak Ridge. For the first time in years, he was reluctant to go back to his orderly, predictable life. Something was awakening in him, a sense of purpose, a connection to this place and to his uncle's legacy. The cabin in the mountains was starting to feel more like home than his house in Oak Ridge ever had. 3 weeks passed slowly for Sam back in Oak Ridge. He taught his classes, graded papers, and attended faculty meetings, but his mind often drifted to the cabin in the mountains. He found himself looking up real estate prices in Colorado, checking job openings at schools near Boulder, and researching the Mountain Vista Development Company online. In the evenings, Sam read the journals he had brought back with him. Frank's careful observations and deep love for the mountain ecosystem came through in every page. Sam also exchanged several emails with Ellie, planning their week of work during his spring break. She had already started cataloging the plant species from the photographs Sam had taken at the cabin. On the Friday before spring break, Sam packed his car and left Oak Ridge as soon as school ended. He drove through the night, stopping only for coffee and gas, eager to return to the mountains. He arrived at the cabin early Saturday morning, tired but excited. The cabin looked just as he had left it, though the forest around it was starting to show signs of spring. Small green shoots pushed through the soil, and buds appeared on some of the trees. Sam unlocked the door and stepped inside, feeling a strange sense of homecoming. He spent the day cleaning, airing out the rooms, and organizing Frank's research materials. Ellie would arrive on Sunday, and they would have 5 full days to work together before she needed to return to the university. Sam wanted everything ready. On Sunday morning, Sam heard a car coming up the driveway. He stepped onto the porch, as Ellie parked her small SUV next to his. She got out wearing jeans and a Boulder University sweatshirt, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "You made good time," Sam called, walking down to help with her bags. "I left at dawn," Ellie said, smiling as she handed him a box of equipment. Couldn't wait to see Frank's collection. They carried her things inside and Sam gave her a tour of the cabin. Ellie was especially interested in the workshop and greenhouse, where she spent over an hour examining the living specimens Frank had been cultivating. "This is amazing," she said as they returned to the cabin for lunch. "Some of these plants are incredibly rare. The seeds alone are valuable for conservation efforts." Over sandwiches at the kitchen table, they planned their approach. They would begin by creating a complete inventory of Frank's research materials, then focus on documenting the most significant findings, particularly the rediscovery of plant species thought to be extinct. "We should also visit some of the locations on Frank's map," Ellie suggested. "Check on the plant populations. Take fresh photographs and samples." Sam nodded. "I'd like that. I've only seen the blue gentian site so far." They spent the afternoon sorting through journals and organizing them chronologically. Ellie was thorough and focused, but also full of stories about her mother's adventures with Frank. Sam found himself watching her as she worked, admiring her enthusiasm and knowledge. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace with cups of tea, Ellie brought up the Mountain Vista development. "There's a public hearing next month," she said. "The company is presenting its environmental impact report, which predictably minimizes the potential damage." "Will you be speaking at the hearing?" Sam asked. "Yes, but I need more concrete evidence." Ellie looked at him thoughtfully. "Have you decided what you'll do with this place?" Sam sighed. "I'm still thinking about it. My life is in Oak Ridge, but being here." He gestured around the cabin. Something about this place feels right. Like I belong here more than I ever belonged there. Ellie nodded. I understand. My mother felt the same way about these mountains. That's why she spent her career studying and protecting them. They worked together for the next 3 days, falling into an easy rhythm. During the day, they cataloged specimens, digitized journal entries, and visited sites on Frank's map. In the evenings, they cooked simple meals and talked by the fire, sharing stories about their lives and work. On Wednesday, they hiked to a remote location where Frank had documented a rare orchid species. According to his notes, it grew in a sheltered valley about 3 miles from the cabin. The hike was challenging, with steep sections and fallen trees blocking the trail in places. Frank made this hike regularly well into his 70s, Sam said, impressed by his uncle's determination. He was incredibly dedicated, Ellie agreed. Mom said he never missed a season checking on his plant sites, even after his heart attack, 5 years ago. They reached the valley by mid-afternoon. It was a beautiful spot, with a small stream running through it and rocky outcrops providing shelter from harsh weather. Following Frank's detailed map, they searched the area where the orchids should be growing. Here, Ellie called suddenly. Sam, come look at this. Sam joined her by a mossy rock face where delicate white flowers grew from narrow green stems. The orchids were small but perfect, their intricate shapes unlike any plant Sam had seen before. Cypripedium. Montanum, Ellie said softly. The mountain lady's slipper. This population has adapted to higher elevations than is typical. Frank documented this colony for over 30 years. Sam took photographs while Ellie made notes on the number of plants and their condition. They were about to leave when they heard voices coming from the other side of the valley. A moment later, 2 men in hiking gear appeared, carrying surveying equipment. The men looked as surprised to see Sam and Ellie as they were to see strangers in this remote spot. The older man, gray-haired and tanned, recovered first. Hello there, he called. Didn't expect to find anyone out here. We could say the same, Ellie replied cautiously. This is private property. Actually, we're just outside the property line, the man said, pointing to a marker nearby. We're surveying for Mountain Vista Development. I'm Jack Prescott, project manager. Sam felt Ellie tense beside him. I'm Sam Miller. This is Dr. Eleanor Morris from Boulder University. Recognition flashed across Prescott's face at Ellie's name. Ah, Dr. Morris, you've been quite vocal at the county meetings. Because I understand what's at stake, Ellie said firmly. This ecosystem is fragile and irreplaceable. Prescott smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We take environmental concerns very seriously. Our plans include substantial green spaces and wildlife corridors. Golf courses aren't green spaces, Ellie countered, and the water usage alone would impact the entire watershed. The conversation grew tense as Ellie pointed out the ecological issues with the development plan. Prescott remained polite but dismissive, suggesting that her concerns were exaggerated. The younger surveyor looked uncomfortable but remained silent. As they were leaving, Prescott turned to Sam. Mr. Miller, since you're Frank's heir, I should mention that Mountain Vista would be very interested in discussing your property. We've made offers on all the surrounding parcels. Your 20 acres would complete our acquisition quite nicely. I'm not selling, Sam said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Prescott handed him a business card. Well, if you change your mind, give me a call. Our offer would be substantial. Sam and Ellie hiked back to the cabin mostly in silence, both troubled by the encounter. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Sam finally spoke about what was on his mind. I'm not going back to Oak Ridge, he said quietly, at least not to stay. Ellie looked up from her notes. You've decided then? Sam nodded. I'll need to return next week to finish the school year and sort things out. But after that, I'm moving here. This place, this work, it matters. Frank knew that. Now I do too. Ellie smiled, her face softening in the firelight. The university would probably be interested in collaborating on a more formal basis. We could establish a research station here, continue Frank's work. I'd like that, Sam said. He looked around. The cabin, at the stacks of journals and specimens they had organized, at the maps showing decades of careful observation. Frank left me more than just a piece of land. He left me a purpose. 2 days later, Sam drove Ellie back to Boulder. They had accomplished more than either had expected, creating a digital catalog of Frank's most important findings and developing a plan for continued research. They had also grown closer, their shared passion for the work creating a bond that felt both professional and personal. As Sam returned to the cabin alone, he felt none of the isolation he might have expected. Instead, he felt connected, to the mountains, to the plants his uncle had protected, to Ellie and her work at the university, and surprisingly to Frank himself. The man he had barely known in life had given him not just a new home, but a new beginning. Sam stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. Tomorrow he would return to Oak Ridge to tie up the loose ends of his old life. But now he knew he would be coming back to the cabin, not as a visitor but as someone continuing the journey his uncle had begun long ago.